Hi, I'm Kalaneko, and do you remember when the AUR was attacked? I'm talking about the AUR. Now, of course, this happened last month. This information is old news, but I just didn't get around to covering it until then. So basically what we're going to be doing is I'm going to be talking about my certain points of this, and SpookyZalost is also going to cover theirs. We kind of split it up because there was a lot to go over when it comes to the AUR, and the AUR is definitely something that's a little bit out of my scope, but not so much that I don't understand it. I did read some things word for word, but this is mainly just for the viewing experience as far as that goes. I do want to let people know that I am collaborating with SpookyZalost, and they are also a fellow Linux VTuber, and they have their parts that they were talking about as well. And hopefully you enjoy what we're going to talk about as far as the AUR, to try to bring awareness to the AUR attacks. Because the AUR attacks happened last month. So it's still kind of old news in a way. It's still kind of old news in a way, but it's also not so bad to where it's like, oh, it's like a month, like it's months away. Like, this could still keep happening. And as long as we bring awareness to it and let people know what's going on, then I think that's the best. So there was a situation, especially when there was an aur-malware-check. This happened in June. This started on June 9th through the 12th, because there were a bunch of malicious comments that were pushed to a number of AUR packages for the aur-malware-check community. So when you take a look at their GitHub page, you're able to see, what was going on. So the detection and the analysis tools for the atomic-lockfile supply chain attack on the Arch user repository generalized to a campaign-based architecture. So basically what ended up happening was a lot of these resources were scattered, and they had to then get them together. That way they're more easily to be found. And there were a lot of problems when it came to the AUR. There were a lot of things as far as like being able to run a certain program check and being able to get everything going as far as like what happened. Which there are things that can help you when it comes to checking for the AUR malware. A lot of packages ended up getting hit. So there's a collection of resources. There are about 16,000 AUR packages compromised. That's a lot of packages. That wasn't good. I am a little bit late talking about this because I've been busy doing other things. But this is still a thing that we still need to talk about, because this could happen to any repository. This could happen to the NixOS config. This could happen to anything that's public facing that doesn't have a lot of verification as far as like clarification goes. Like, now you can't even make any sort of account on the AUR because of this. And basically what ended up happening is there was an atomic-lockfile, and it was illegitimate, and it was there was a lot of impersonation as far as like NPM goes. And the attackers injected the atomic-lockfile, the JS digest, and the lockfile.js into the build packages. And there were two attack waves that ended up happening. One of which was the atomic-lockfile for NPM, or lockfile.js, which these accounts were the Kriz, Narvagarva, Franz, Kuiber, Tobias Westerberg, Ellen, Mai, Kelibust, and Arojas, which impersonated a legitimate maintainer. The second attack was the JS Digest, the bun accounts, which would be the Custodia Tovar and Vera Malageris. I'm saying these words wrong, but you get what I'm talking about. There was a lot of impersonation. There was a lot of people taking accounts and uploading a bunch of malware to a public-facing archive that only really require you to have an email. And both of them had info stealers and rootkits that were going to be installed into the AUR, which when it comes to a Linux thing, it was very scary because it might end up turning a bunch of people off from using Linux. People are like, oh, I want to use CachyOS, but they use something from the AUR. Well, it starts to create issues as far as, oh, you know, I want to use this. Now, of course, Arch is more than just the AUR. You could use Pacman, you can use Yay, you can use, you know, other, I mean, those are AUR helpers, but you can use like other resources that are not required by the AUR. However, there's a lot of packages on the AUR, and some people who do have packages, you know, either have to uninstall or avoid updating completely. This also ended up causing a bunch of people to switch OSs from like CachyOS or Endeavor to something like Void Linux or something completely different.
On June 11th, suspicious AUR activity was reported in connection with alvr. I would not call that the beginning of the attack because community tracking points to malicious commits starting earlier, around June 9th. But the alvr report matters because it was one of the early public signals that something larger was happening. Later that day, at 1747, Jonathan Grotelüschen opened a centralized AUR reporting thread. That was important because reports were starting to scatter across different users, packages, and accounts. The centralized thread turned the response from isolated reports into organized triage. At that point, the community was no longer just asking, is this one package bad? It was asking, how many packages were touched, and how do we track them?
So, and there was also a problem with the preliminary analysis of the AUR malware. So when it comes to, you know, them taking a look at the malware, basically is when ioctl.fail published a static analysis to the atomic-lockfile, payload. And basically what they did is and this happened on June 11th when they posted this. But basically it's the reports basically like the ALF malware samples named deps in a static review of the recovered npm package resources associated with the incident. The sample and package were treated as malicious. And throughout the handling, no dynamic execution of the ALF npm package, lifecycle scripts, or package code was performed. The binary was stripped and implemented when there was style async state machines. Function names in this report or analysis assign names based on decompiled behavior. Basically what that means is they got their shit jacked. And when they went ahead and took a look at that, based on what was going on, basically when they were treating the package, because they had to analyze what was going on as far as like the packages goes, because like the AUR is very much a public-facing. It's a community ran and public-facing archive of a bunch of packages that people use from day in and day out. And the whole implementation of the AUR, to my understanding, it was community. Well, when you start having something like this happen, especially around, you know, the wonderful time when Windows is like doing its worst ever, and people are trying to find solutions, and trying to move over to other, you know, distributions and other Linux distributions, you start having problems to where it's like, okay, what do we do here? What's going on with this now here? And what can we do to fix this here? You know, kind of stuff like that. And, you know, they start taking a look at like what happened during the incident. Basically what was compromised is they're involving like an Arch user repository or the AUR. The package build flow ended up getting compromised. There was an attacker that modified the AUR's build steps, and the process downloaded and installed malicious npm code or packages, and it masqueraded as an atomic-lockfile. And this was originating from version 1.4.2. and included the Linux elf payload src/hooks/deps. Now, there were many more AUR packages that were hacked as well, and there's probably even more that we don't even know. But people are like obviously going through this, they're discussing what's going on, they're trying to isolate the problem by preventing new accounts from being made, they're trying to prevent this situation from ever happening again, because this is disastrous. Like, imagine if it happened to the NixOS packages, it'd probably be even worse. Imagine if this happened to any sort of public-facing package or repo, which that's basically the risk that you run when you are using community-made repos instead of like repos that are only like through certain things. Like I use Bazzite, so I'm using a immutable distro. So if something were to happen or something were to go wrong on my end, I could easily roll something back. But people who are like playing and using Arch, CachyOS, I guess Omarchy, Endeavor OS, and other distributions that are Arch based, that are not Atomic, that use the AUR to their advantage to try to get certain things working, well, you might have issues when it comes to rolling things back, because then you are either forced to remove the package entirely to keep your system up and running and safe as possible, or you're in the situation to where you're having to go about like trying to prevent that from happening to begin with. And there were a lot of packages that were used. The npm package also ended up stating something as far as like using a pre-install lifecycle hook to execute the elf. So basically, it pre-installed and it hooked onto the installation elf file. And basically, if somebody were to try to, get rid of it, well, it could probably hook onto the pre-install, or it could probably hook onto a package that was like going to be compromised to begin with. And basically, the deps is a credential stealer. So deps, or DEPS, is a Linux credential stealer, and it's with the optional rootkit capabilities. So it was very much a malicious package to begin with, and it does target a lot of applications. Basically, these applications, which they are rootkit capabilities as far as like token stealers, which you might have heard something similar happen to people who are on Windows when they click on links for Discord to see that they have Discord accounts that are compromised, and they start going into other situations that are related to that. Well, browsers that are going to be affected by that, especially during the Electron application data, Slack, Microsoft Teams, Discord, GitHub, NPM, Vault, Docker, Podman, SSH VPN material, shell histories, and other local developer secrets. So basically what that would do is that would basically uncover those secrets, make them available for the attackers, then the attackers could then compromise what's going on with that, and that's the scary part about it all, because nobody should have to deal with something like that, especially in a situation like that. And that's just basically the situation when it came to that. The other issue with this is when they were putting in these endpoints, the elf file, because it wasn't supplied by the npm package, the command line arguments of JavaScript wrapper, the binary decodes this onion service, which is a .onion domain, which .onion domains are associated with the Tor browser, which is associated then with Tails. So you could technically think that the attackers were using something like that to try to obfuscate themselves and then do as much damage as possible. Because if you're starting to compromise a bunch of packages, you basically want to make a statement, and these people have made statements on this thing as well, which is very crazy. But like the whole idea of the malware analysis for the AUR is that they were just stealing keys, and they were trying to inject payloads and do as much damage as possible. It was going through like layers, rootkits, It even would take stuff that was out of your temp folder or temp.sh, upload destination, an API agent channel. So basically, try to take as much as possible. And it was definitely like, not only that, it was also related to like a supply chain attack, and there were high level capabilities. And this is basically what people should be more or less afraid of, I would think, when it comes to a situation like that. Now, granted, they are still handling this. They are still trying to get the damage control done and stuff. But the whole situation is that this is what is installing a persistence file. It enforces a single active instance using the flock. It redirects standard output endpoint errors for dev null. So basically, it just redirects where those go as far as like the errors go, and it's like a vector attack. Basically, it's an execution vector. It's a C2 endpoint. It's encoded, and it's inside the ELF itself. So it's like pretending that it's another file when it's actually just malicious. And it reads the proc self exe to locate, copy, install, and its current executable. It uses a Rust async runtime, enumerates Chromium family browser profiles, electronic app data. So I mean, that's something that could also affect something like OBS, because OBS also uses the Chromium Ceph stuff. So imagine you're streaming, and all of a sudden it takes your streaming credentials. You are fucked. Or if you are like using like anything that's like Chromium based, or it's something that's using like Electron app based, or HTML based that is related to anything Chromium based, because it extracts any sort of cookies and service tokens. That means tokens like Discord browser tokens, other tokens you might have, tokens like that, which is very tokens like that, which is very crazy to begin with. It takes the SQLite cookie databases and LevelDB local storage. So basically, it looks through all the database history, tries to get as much information as possible, and the main targets mainly would be stuff for like Slack, Microsoft Teams, Discord, GitHub. Basically, anything you'd really have any sort of API token or cookies with, or any sort of logged in domains. If it was on like a system where you had like auto-filled passwords, you also need to either do a reinstall and then reset all your passwords, and that way it can't do anything, or you just have to remove those packages and then reset out your passwords. Which could be hard because not everybody's going to want to do that. They're just better off just like reinstalling and then doing what they got to do. And if it was privileged, it can also take anything out of any sort of crypto. I mean, that's the thing. Like, there are crypto stealers, and that's basically what a lot of these hacks are lately, is they're trying to take money, crypto, anything that they could turn into a liquidation or an asset to get money out of it, to extract money from somebody. They're going to try to do that, which could be in relation to a bunch of other hacks as well, as far as like token and vault tokens and stuff like that, and credentials. And then it goes back to that .onion domain, because .onion domains are used on the deep web. So I mean, if they're able to pull that, use that through like Monero's a crypto thing, so it can kind of pull from that as well. And if sufficiently privileged, it loads the embedded rootkit to hide process name and socket inode. So if it gets all the privileges that it needs, it can hide itself in your system for like days to weeks, and you wouldn't even know it's in there unless somebody told you. It's scary shit. And then basically, based on persistence, there are two ways that it can do it. So if it's being done through a rootkit, it copies because basically it uses persistence. It tries to remain persistent in your system. It tries to make it to where you can't get rid of it. And there are ways to get rid of it, obviously, but it doesn't want to leave your system because it wants to abuse and what it has to do. Like, it's a huge thing. So if it got root of your system, it takes your var.lib folder, creates a system service under system, and configures restart behavior. So basically, they could remotely fucking jack your shit. And then the non-root behavior is if it doesn't get root, then it gets your home directory instead, and it, you know, per your user systemd users, it goes and starts messing with your systemd stuff. So either way, it's bad, and it ignores any sort of, because it gets exported, because the exported main wrapper initializes the runtime behavior, redirects and standard, you know, descriptors, ignores any sort of sig pipe, and it also enters the Rust async application. The primary orchestrator is an async state, that machine that starts persistence collections, rootkit setup, local transport, acceleration, and staging tasks. So it starts to basically get around a bunch of things, and it wants to either get root, or if it doesn't have root, it'll basically use what you have. And there's definitely a lot more to this, but the whole like the TLDR on a lot of this stuff that I'm looking at is it can take a lot of things from a lot of profiles, from a lot of web browsers too. It affects like every web browser on Arch Linux. It can even go through HTTP. It can go through certain layers. It can take a look at your TCP and UDP sockets. Right here I'm seeing TCP. It can use a SOCKS style transport to decode onion host to hide itself. It's bad. It's all bad all around. You don't want to touch this with a 10-foot pole. Like it can touch anything from like Google Chrome all the way down to like the Zen browser, I think. Actually, Zen's not even listed here, but it's Google Chrome all the way to like the Yandex browser. It get even up to certain flat packs. Malware targets developer collaboration data confirmed or strongly supported targeted software services, and data stores are listed below. Google Chrome, Chrome Beta, Chrome Dev, Microsoft Edge, Edge Beta, Edge Dev, Brave, you know. It's a bunch of shit. Oh my god. Okay, so like there's like a lot of web browsers, and there's also some flat packs that could be affected by it. Like the Chromium Flatpak, Google Chrome Flatpak, Microsoft Edge Flatpak, Brave Flatpak, Vivaldi, Opera, the Yandex browser. Like there are Flatpaks that could be affected by this. I don't know if it affects any current Flatpaks right now, but this is basically it. And artifacts target include local storage, level DB, network cookies, default cookies, Chromium encrypted cookie values. And there were a bunch of apps that got affected or could have been affected by that on Arch, which would be Slack, Flatpak, Slack Snap, Teams, Stores, Discord, basically all versions of Discord, Vescop, Legcord, Webcord, Armcord, basically everything related to Discord. Confirmed Slack pass and data include a bunch of stuff. Like there's a whole bunch of stuff into this article. But basically a lot of stuff ended up getting jacked, and people had to roll it back. People had to fix it. People had to make sure that it's not going to be deployed. So it seems like this would have been a big attack vector. These people are like, oh yeah, Linux is very secure, but then when something like this happens, it starts to raise people's eyebrows, especially in situations like this. Now, still granted, Linux is still more secure than Windows, but in a situation like this, as big as it was, especially with the AUR, this could have like done some real damage. Wasn't caught.
At 11:53:23, JS Digest was unpublished from npm, that's Node Package Manager. That mattered because JS Digest was part of the bun-based malicious install path. Pulling it helped break one piece of the attacker's chain, but it did not automatically clean the AUR. The malicious AUR commits still had to be found, reverted, and checked by users. Later, Frederick Zhang reported another account adopting more packages. One example used a post-install command involving bun and packages like execa, JS Digest, and Commander. The exact package names matter less than the behavior. Package gets adopted, install time script gets added, script pulls JavaScript tooling through bun. For a random AUR package, that should raise every red flag.
Which later on down the line, we ended up finding that Koraynilay reported a JS Digest search showing 879 packages and posted a list of them, which there is a list of them that you could take a look at as well, and I'll have a link to that as well, because it has a whole digest for that, especially during that initial list, where you can actually check what they are. That basically protect yourself. And there was like a program you could run to check to see if you were impacted, or it was a script that you could run that check to see if you were impacted or not. Because if anything, it was a huge thing. Because basically, one of the things that are really cool about the Arch community as well as the Linux community as a whole is if there's something that's wrong, people are going to find a way to make sure that they can be safe. And it seems like that's what they're doing. It seems like that's what they were. That's the goal here with this. And then Aaron Fischer ended up reporting even more packages using the JS with the fake Gmail contributor emails and observed behavior suggesting a script periodically rewriting GitHub history. So basically, these hackers were trying to rewrite the history of these packages to try to say, oh no, it's always been like this. It's like a huge smear campaign at this point. Like trying to say, oh, the AUR is going to be like, oh, maybe you shouldn't use Linux, you should be on Windows. Oh, like that's basically what I think is happening here. I think they're trying to frame it as if, oh, Linux was never safe. What are you talking about? You can be on Windows, and it's where it's more safe. And because there's a lot of things where they ended up posting things so that they were like, oh, it's posting troll emails, troll messages if anybody was affected, and it's fucked up. And yeah, and Gaming on Linux ended up publishing an article for this because they started talking about AUR had over 400 packages compromised with malware. Of course, there was more than that. And they had basically reported that you can't create accounts on the AUR, you can't, publish any package updates, and adopting or creating new packages, you're not be able to even do that at the moment. And the AUR needs some better security. So yeah, the AUR definitely needs some better security when it comes to something like this. It has a malicious, users start to compromise a lot of packages. This starts to create this downward trend where it's like, okay, what's actually safe on Linux? What can be used? Like, a lot of stuff sort of common sense when it comes to certain things, but when you start getting hit like this, it's kind of hard to really want to do anything with it. But the public AUR mailing list with people's reporting packages, seems like over 400 packages were hit with the issue, which we later on found out it was about 16,000 packages. A lot of it was a keylogger, info stealer, and to be fair, it's like a huge security breach. So, Gaming on Linux ended up covering it, and hopefully they're able to sort it out, especially with the AUR, prevent this from happening in the future. But yeah, on the 12th, the day after that other article was posted, the Gaming on Linux ended up covering.
On June 13th, A821 reported a mutation using fragmented shell strings. One detection clue was a split-apart bun string where the letters were separated by apostrophes. That looks weird because it's supposed to. Instead of writing bun plainly, the command was broken into fragments so a simple string search might miss it, but so the command would still read normally to the operating system. Nicholas Boychat later reported another obfuscated wave, detected with help from a local LLM called Gemma. The reconstructed behavior was essentially cd/temp and bun add ANSI colors next file-js. That shows adaptation. The earlier payloads were easier to catch by searching for obvious strings. The later mutation tried to hide the same kind of behavior behind shell fragments and escape sequences. So the defensive lesson changes. Do not only search for known bad package names, look for suspicious behavior, new .install files, commands running from temp or bun or node package manager, and unrelated packages, obfuscated shell, and mass adoption behavior are the real warning signs.
And then Phoronix ended up posting something. So, and it was more than 15,000 packages at that point. And this happened on June the 12th. So this happened like obviously last month. Initially, there were 400 packages hit. Ended up being more than 15,000 affected packages. Bad enough of finding more than 400 AUR packages for Arch Linux users had been infected with malware. And now that number has risen to around 900 a few hours ago, which basically at the time of writing, it ended up going even further than 1,500, which we found out to be like 1,600 plus. So a lot of packages ended up getting hit. Phoronix ended up talking about the amount of packages being hit. This is a pretty big thing. This is something like, this is a very sophisticated malware attack where people ended up trying to cause as much damage as possible. And they wanted to make it to where people are basically scared to use Linux at that point. Because I'm like, you have to think about it. Like the amount of times like this has been happening and reported on. What do you think? Like people are tired of Windows. They don't have the money to buy a Mac. They want to install an alternative operating system. So they go ahead and they start installing something like Arch Linux, for example, because they want to get into the deep end of Linux and try to learn Linux as much as possible. Which basically one of the better Linux distributions. Which I say that in quotations because every Linux distribution is great. It just depends on how you use it. I could probably see where their heads at, even though they are very malicious. It's like, it's completely fucked up. Because imagine people are like, oh, I don't want to go on Windows anymore, and they start using Arch, and all of a sudden Arch gets hit, and they're like, oh, I don't know if I want to be on Arch now. So like, it starts affecting that, and it starts, getting people scared if you use their system. And I thought I had all this freedom. All of a sudden, I didn't think this would happen. And this is what happens when people start adopting things too. Like, this isn't the first time the AUR's been hacked or hurt to begin with. AUR prior to this, like last year, the AUR ended up getting DDoSed like 5 or 6 times, and it happened quite a lot. And it was kind of fucky, honestly. And I guess this is like their next step into compromising people's systems, having people reinstall everything, reset everything up.
By June 12th, Arch had posted an official notice. Gaming on Linux noted the statement was up around 1855 hours. The important phrase from Arch was that they were seeing a high volume of malicious AUR adoptions and updates. That confirms that this was not just forum panic or rumor. This was officially recognized as a large-scale AUR issue. Arch's advice was to review package build and install script changes. That matters because the AUR, the package recipe, is the thing. You are not only trusting upstream software, you are trusting the instructions that tell your system how to download, build, and install it.
And part of the whole them wanting to change history thing, this is basically what was happening because level 1 techs, a user by the name of D-Laborer ended up catching this. It says, appears someone has submitted numerous malicious updates to various AUR packages. 400 plus was the last that they saw, and there's way more than that, obviously. The main change was adding npm as a dependency and then installing a package from there. They also alter the maintainer's email address without changing the underlying name. So basically what they did is they altered the email address, but they didn't change the name that was attached to it. There's also a lot of recent comments, usually about 7 of them, using a different dependency each time. The earliest reference that they saw was on the Arch mailing list that is from May 30th. So there's a chance this was even persisting even before the attack was even known. And the main reporting thread, which was has a list of packages known as to have been compromised, although it's not clear which these have been rolled back. So around the time, I think this was about 21 days ago, June 12th, it ended up, this was, what level 1 text ended up reporting, that these email addresses were getting altered and changed to try to pose as the posters because they wanted to do this very much maliciously.
A few things should still be handled carefully. First, the final affected package count is not determined. Different public sources reported different numbers at different points. Early reports talked about a few hundred packages, Later reports went beyond 1,500. Some community trackers showed even higher counts during the investigation. Unless there's an official count, it's safer to say 1,500 packages plus publicly, as far as reported affected packages. Second, affected packages are not the same thing as infected users. A package being on a list means it had a malicious commit or was associated with the campaign. A user was directly at risk if they built, installed, or updated one of those packages during the attack window. Third, separate the malware campaign from the later troll activity. The later Russian language spam was vandalism and primarily an opportunistic cluster unless stronger evidence connects them to the Atomic Arch credential theft campaign. Fourth, attribution remains unresolved. No one has been identified as the actual attacker and source of the attacks, but the behavior looks more organized than a random prank. No responsible actor has been publicly confirmed, but parts of it were more consistent with known organized cybercrime groups.
Then a couple days after that, on June 14, Phoronix ended up posting another article. Just day after Arch Linux developers believed they got their malware AUR incident under control, with 15,000 packages affected by AUR, another round of AUR malware is now being discovered. So they're just going to keep going with this until the AUR has to be completely fundamentally changed. Which I think that's what's going to end up happening. The AUR is just going to have to be fundamentally changed at this point. The AUR cannot exist in today's age, especially when they continue to obfuscate and continue to compromise a bunch of packages, which includes like Node.js packages, Plasma 6 applets package, Firefox packages, aur browser LibreWolf extensions, NeoVim plugins. Basically, some of the more common things people would use on Linux for convenience sake, they're just going to compromise, and they want to do that as quickly as possible, and they want to make sure that they're able to, affect a lot of people in that situation. And the fact that there's way more packages too that they're uncovering is completely scary to think about, because if it got caught as soon as May 30th, there's a possibility it could have been happening way before then. Like, there may have been some underlying packages in the AUR that needed to be found a lot sooner, that ended up getting found later, that people are now like, oh no, look at all these packages that got compromised.
Linux streamers and VTubers should pay close attention, because a streamer machine is not just a normal desktop. It is usually a personal machine, a production machine, and an account management machine all at once. It may contain sessions for streaming profiles, OBS profiles, configuration, cookies, social media logins, model files, overlays, scripts, and keys, project files, and other things related to your work as a streamer. So the risk is not only malware on the PC, the risk is losing access to your identity as a creator. A compromised streamer system can mean stolen accounts, exposed settings, lost community access, stolen assets, or damage to a channel. The lesson is not stop using Arch. The lesson is stop treating AUR updates like invisible background maintenance. If you stay on Arch, use official repos when possible, review AUR updates before applying them, read the package build, read the source info, read any install file. Watch for bun, npm, yarn, pnpm, temp, curl, wget, obfuscated shell profile wights, or new install hooks, maintainer changes, and recently adopted orphan packages. That is, packages that have been abandoned or otherwise no longer updated by their creator. Update the AUR packages in small batches instead of all at once. This makes it easier to go through and check them for any sort of attack or other sort of malware. Keep backups or snapshots of your system if you can. Use two-factor authentication on important accounts, and separate browser profiles for streaming, personal, and admin work. These are all best practices if you're a VTuber or streamer on a Linux system, and especially Arch right now. The AUR is still useful, as it is the source of long-tail and often no longer updated packages and resources, but it should be treated like a community-maintained build instructions from the internet. Read before you run. The AUR attack was not just about a few obscure packages. It was an attack on the trust model that lets community software preservation work. The AUR matters because it keeps the long tail alive. Unusual tools, abandoned software, hardware helpers, stream utilities, vendor packages, and things the official repos may never carry. That openness is valuable, and it was abused. The answer is not panic or blind trust, but informed caution. Review before you install. Review before you update. Protect your accounts, keep backups, and use the AUR responsibly. Attackers tried to make the AUR less trustworthy, so the community response should be to make it harder to abuse without destroying what made it worth protecting in the first place.
Thank you for watching the video. Go ahead and follow SpookyZalost if you haven't already. They are a Linux VTuber, they use Linux, they do a bunch of retro gaming as well, so make sure you check them out. And they also do reviews and Let's Plays as well. If you want to go ahead and support me, support the video, like or dislike the video, go ahead and follow me on Twitch, subscribe to me on YouTube. If you like the video so much, you can also support me on Ko-Fi, and I will be catching you all later. Bye-bye.